Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We welcome you, whatever time and wherever in the world you are listening. We are pleased you have found us. You are now listening to Inside the Bunghole, a podcast taking you on a journey through wine. Together, we will learn more about this wonderful elixir of life. So raise your glass to welcome your hosts and partners in wine, Pam and James. You are now inside the bunghole.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Inside the Bunghole. We are here with Pete Stolpman of Stolpman Vineyards, and we are at their beautiful tasting room in Los Olivos. And we love these wines. We referred to the La Cuadrilla in the Zero podcast.
Yes,
one of James's favorites.
I'm a member here.
Yes, we're members. So.
God bless you both.
Thank you. Thank you. Before I start off, I got to talk about your mustache. Lay it on me. You look like an old picture from like 1920, like from baseball. It's brilliant. I love it.
Well, as I don't have much on top anymore,
right?
And being a redhead, for whatever reason, the beard comes in a bit patchy. I figured it was time for a bit of facial hair. So it started in Movember, and my wife approved. So
it's a great stash, dude. Because I saw you with the mask yesterday, and then when you said, "Okay, let's do the interview," you took the mask off. I was like, "Wow!" I was shaking.
Shocking.
It was awesome.
Yeah, even my friends, like when you walk up, and you haven't seen a friend for a while, and take off your mask, and people jump back, and so there are fans and detractors, and.
That's good.
Haters.
My partner in Combe, Raj Par, the first time he saw it, he goes, "You look 5 years older," but that's a good thing. You could stand to be a bit, have that air of maturity about you. But
right.
He's seen me acting very immature before, so
the stash brings it down.
So you just mentioned one of the questions he had, which was the comb. So we have here, we've got the estate. And then So Fresh, which is where we're actually sitting right now, and then the comb. Can you give me an idea of what's going on here at Stolpman?
Yeah, the main winery, the main brand is classic. It has evolved over the past 31 years, but we're not trying to reinvent anything with that. I mean, we're just making pure, delicious wines. Fairly traditional, just with our own twist. And then So Fresh came about starting in 2013. We had grown confident in the raw power and concentration of our vineyard. We don't get rainfall here during the growing season anywhere in Santa Barbara County, and Ruben, our vineyard manager, has continued to push the envelope of dry farming.
That's what I said on your door, dry farming. I don't know what that means.
So we don't like to irrigate. We've trained our vines to get used to a summer without irrigation. So when they wake up the following year after their dormant winter, they know that all summer there's not going to be more water in the ground. So they take what water is available and they root really deep into our limestone, and they don't get overly ambitious. So they set a pretty conservative crop, and then they transfer their energy earlier to ripening rather than trying to grow a bigger and bigger canopy. So the vine is naturally in balance, but a very conservative balance. So we don't get a whole lot of crop. Both our dry farming and the rock that the vines are growing in, the limestone, combined for low yield. So the wines are concentrated, they're not diluted. So the big evolution that we've gone through on the classic side is to get more and more gentle with our extraction. We don't need to try and pull every little bit of color and tannin out of the skin. And that led to much more delicate work in the winery. And eventually to the question, what if we don't try to extract it all? What if we just use the flavor inside the grape, the juice? We don't mash up the skins.
Is this the uncrushed?
Yeah, so that is the So Fresh brand. So
yeah,
all of the wines are what we call carbonic fermentation, which is a dumb, geeky name that just refers to fermenting in a sealed tank where there's no oxygen. But the key takeaway is that we're making chilled red wines without crushing the fruit. A traditional wine, the first thing we do is we foot trod, we begin to circulate. We want all the maceration of the skin, the pulp, the seed to make, a rich, thick red wine. But with the So Fresh wines, they're all light, and because we're not pulling the tannin, that dryness on the finish, from the skin, we can drink them cold. The main reason we don't drink red wine more chilled than we do is the tannin becomes even more pronounced and the fruit can become muted. The rich texture kind of goes away when the wine's too cold. But if you're making light, low tannin wines, you can drink them right out of the fridge, which is great in California.
Yeah, absolutely, especially in the desert.
And whose idea was So Fresh to kind of go in that direction?
So it came from a mentor of ours, a gentleman named Peter Paston. He has, he had a fine dining restaurant in DuPont Circle, Washington, D.C. called Obelisk. And I went to college in D.C. And my parents took me there once when they were visiting. And but it wasn't like over the top fine dining. It was, rapidly changing menu, kind of like Alice Waters style, but very, very elevated. He opened a casual concept, a pizzeria called Two Amy's, and he wanted us to make an Italian varietal. Sangiovese is our main Italian varietal, but he wanted to make it delicious and pizza wine, and he wanted to buy it in big kegs and just have it be his house wine.
Big table wine.
Right.
Yeah.
And I have no problems with our wine being pizza wine. As we all know, the pizza game, in our country at least, has gotten better and better and better. So the problem was that our Sangiovese has a ton of tannin. Sangiovese is a naturally tannic grape, and it's naturally high acid. So when you look at Italian wine law, the DOCG law, I worked in Chianti. It's most extreme for Sangiovese in Montalcino, Brunello di Montalcino, where if you want to call your wine a Reserva, you need to barrel age that for at least 3 years, and you have to wait 5 years before you reserve it, or before you release the reserve wine. The reason for that is the Italians figured out, okay, Sangiovese when it's young is rustic. You need to give the wine time to integrate, to allow the fruit and the mid-body to envelop the tannin, for just to allow that rustic sharpness to integrate and become luxurious. But what if you're not extracting the tannin? And then acid is your friend, because you want either tannin or acid to balance the wine on the finish. But if you don't have the tannin, you need high acid. So it meant picking earlier, because you want that crisp tartness, and ferment completely dry. So it's just refreshing and delicious. So we didn't rebrand the wine to Love You Bunches until 2016, and that story happened at a wedding in Montana. Our friends, our dear friends who Jessica, my wife, actually set up, Patton and Emily, were getting married, and they asked for our Carbonic Sangiovese as a wedding gift to serve at the reception, and said, sure, no problem. Another wine friend of ours, Joni, she put up a cute little picture of the bottle with the Montana mountains in the background, and the caption on Instagram read, "Nothing says I love you, will you marry me, like Carbonic Sangiovese." And if you'd tried the wine before, it made it sound such a happy, lovely wine. But if you just read that, you're like, what is she talking about? But I thought it was really cute. And then, of course, this is all happening hungover in bed the next morning. I'm just looking through the wedding hashtag. And the first guy who had commented on it, a guy from Quebec, a Quebecois, Remy Charest, had commented, "Nothing says I love you bunches like carbonic fermentation." Or actually, he referred to it as carbonic maceration, which is just another name for it. The whole grape fermentation. And right there, I'm like, that pun is amazing. It needs to be our new label. And in my head, it was just a post-it note on the fridge. Love you bunches, be back at 5. And we had a penmanship contest with our wine club members. We had everybody write love you bunches, and we would give whoever won a free case. So everybody took it way too seriously. Little hearts and calligraphy. And I wanted the post-it note. So Ruben ended up writing his own, our vineyard manager. And Ruben has this funny scrawl that, he went to grade school in Jalisco, and he graduated quote-unquote high school, which if you grow up in the countryside in the middle of nowhere in Mexico, you graduate, maybe when you're 14, and then you got to get to work. So he has this amazing, just like very unique penmanship.
Right.
And so he ended up writing it at the after party, the wine club party, where we were drinking a bunch of tequila. It was dark, and so it wound up looking like I Love Munches. So Carrie and I just both fell in love with it. And on the back of the card it said Ruben in giant writing, and she said, go find Ruben, have him rewrite it, don't drink tequila this time. And so Ruben does all of the writing for our So Fresh labels. So
now, did he get a free case?
Oh, he gets a ton of free wine. he is family.
It seems like making like So Fresh, that the wine there, you're trying to make it hassle-free and organic. It's difficult in a way, I'm sure. Is it just as difficult, not grinding it through, doing the trained watering, just the water that it's on, just as making traditional wines?
It's a lot different. It can be nerve-wracking. We've created a trend here where two of our friends are making carbonic wine, and one in particular called me like every day leading up to picking, what sugar am I looking for, can I bring a cluster by for you to taste before I call the pick, how long do you leave it in that tank. The main difference is with red wine and even white wine, we're so used to checking in on it. Even if we're not actively working it like a white wine, you can measure how fermentation is going, you can taste as the sugar's fermenting to dryness. With carbonic fermentation, you have all of the whole grapes that have been, each bunch has been lovingly put into that tank, there to the pun, love you bunches. We have to be even more loving with each bunch. We hand pick everything. But with lovey bunches, any fruit destined for carbonic wine, we're even more loving. But you can't measure what's going on because you can't get in there to break open the fruit.
Yeah, so it's locked in there.
No, we joke. We close the tank and we walk away and come back between 1 week and 3 weeks later.
And cross your fingers.
We joke that we lovingly caress the tank and how are you guys doing in there?
Yeah.
And the other thing that's really unique about us, we don't inoculate. So a lot of people, when it comes to carbonic fermentation, because they can't control it, they can't feed the yeast or anything they would normally do if there were problems, they mitigate the risk by throwing in some really effective yeast. We don't do that. So everything we do is natively fermented. So just the yeast coming in off the vineyard and the yeast present in the wine or in the winery. We trust the native yeast to ferment, which creates a more difficult fermentation, a longer fermentation, but we like that because the longer the fermentation, we believe, the more nuance. So like Beaujolais Nouveau often is a really quick fermentation.
Yep.
And you can get like bubblegum and banana runt, and it can be a little less desirable, I think, than the Cru Beaujolais Village, that the winemakers are more patient. They're not rushing it out for immediate drinking. So a lot of people have this, bubblegum banana runt thing. Like, I don't like carbonic fermentation. Well, there are a lot of different ways to ferment carbonically, and I don't get those notes from the So Fresh wines.
And how's the So Fresh selling in response to everybody?
Love You Bunches is our number one wine.
Wow.
Is it?
Yeah, and we've been only making it for 5 years. So
now, have you ever had a clusterfuck? Where it's like, ooh, that didn't turn out so good.
Well, the funniest thing, I don't know how long ago, but one year I got approached for like 4 or 5 different reality TV shows. And I know enough about reality TV to know that you have to have a clusterfuck every episode.
Yes.
And there needs to be a big dramatic cliffhanger every episode.
Yep.
And I'm like, no. That is the opposite of what I want in a winery.
Yeah.
Like 18 and 19 were the smoothest finishes we've ever had. We never had a heat wave in those finishes. Objectively, they are our best years ever. Since 1994, our first harvest, and that was beautiful. It would have been so boring for a network reality TV show, but that's the way we like
perfect.
There's no train wrecks.
Yeah, so
now,
occasionally
20,
a clusterfuck does happen, but we.
You've been lucky. Now 20 was a harsh year.
20, we had the Labor Day heat. It was a record-breaking heat wave, and thank God Ruben has trained our vineyard the way he has, where Our roots are 40 feet deep into that limestone. They're damp and cold down there. And, if you think about the being of a vine, an old vine, the vast majority of that being is underground. And hopefully with that strength of that vast root network, we can shrug off heat waves. So our vineyard held pretty darn well.
Now, where do you grow?
So we are in Ballard Canyon, the beautiful curvy road just about 2 miles to the west of Los Olivos. We aren't open to the public out there, but it is a gorgeous vineyard. My dad bought 218 acres. In 1990, there were no vineyards back in Ballard Canyon. Luckily for us, he planted Syrah. Among other grapes, and Syrah just took off. Back then, he was only selling the fruit to other winemakers. They made terrific wine, huge ratings back pre-internet when people just waited for the Wine Advocate and Wine Spectator to arrive on their doorstep, and getting 95 to 100 point ratings from our vineyard put us on the map. The local community back then was so small that the Beckmans came over and bought the ranch next door. Stan Kroenke, who owns the LA Rams and is a big business guy, he bought the ranch on the other side of Beckman. The Larners came in, the Rusacks. I'm not going in order of people starting, but now we have 15 vineyards in Ballard Canyon. And the really cool thing is my dad did the very expensive, patient game of finding the right matches. And everybody else could learn from what my dad did and plant Syrah and other own varieties. So now we're the only American viticultural area dedicated to the grape Syrah. So on the classic side, we are known for Syrah throughout the world. And then, so fresh, we can do whatever we want. It's just fun.
Right.
And then Combe came along in 2014 when celebrity sommelier turned winemaker Raj Parr. We had been making his Chardonnay for him since 2010. He persuaded me to plant a very rare grape in America, the Jurassic varietal Trousseau. Well, originally from the Iberian Peninsula, often called Bastardo or Bastarda, the bastard, because it's a very ugly grape, very pale and patchy. So we've really branched out from Syrah on the other two brands, but Sangiovese was my dad's baby too.
Because Sangiovese is a hard grape to grow.
Well, and Sangiovese had suffered utter and complete failure in California. Sangiovese was set to take over where Merlot was falling off in the late 80s, and they called it the Calatal movement. And unfortunately, the growers at that time, their solution to that rustic, high acid, high tannin profile was to get the Sangiovese really ripe on the vine, let that tannin melt, and it lost any Sangiovese character. It was just kind of plunky, ripe red wine, table wine at best. And that's its Cabernet was becoming king in Napa. Yeah. So all those Sangiovese vineyards were grafted over to Cab, and people just walked away from what was going to be the next big thing after Merlot. And that's right when my dad was planting. My dad put in our first 10 acres of Sangiovese in 1994, and his attitude was, we're 300 miles south of Napa. We're the Wild West. We'll do whatever we want. And he was passionate about Italian wine, loved Sangiovese and Nebbiolo. So we're up to 21 acres of Sangiovese, and then we have a little half-acre Nebbiolo just for Dad to drink. So we put Dad's picture on the Nebbiolo label.
How did he get into wine?
So Dad moved from Ohio to LA when he was 17, and he and his buddies started a valet car parking company. As teenage boys, they were more than willing to run up and down the Hollywood Hills parking for private parties. Wow. So imagine 1968, sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Yeah.
All these producers and actors throwing ragers every week.
Yeah.
And my dad and his buddies were parking all the fancy cars and loving life and getting tips. And a couple of those producers were drinking Bordeaux. And my dad noted, okay, like if you're going to be a big shot, you better know about fine wine. Started getting into it a little bit, and he figured out real quick that if he ordered a bottle of wine out on a date, number one, he wouldn't get carded, and number two, the date would be very impressed, and it would probably go better with that bottle of wine than not.
Sure.
And worked on my mom. My mom and dad got married. My dad sold his share of the company in order to study for the bar, and passed the bar, thankfully. And in the meantime, they got married and took a road trip up through California. And of course, my dad had to go to Napa Valley for the first time. And my mom was really impressed that he knew enough about wine that he could kind of BS his way through an appointment with a winemaker. Back then, you just walked into a Napa Valley winery and tracked down the winemaker and tasted some barrels. And my dad is a great BSer, which helps.
Well, he's a lawyer.
Helps the lawyer thing, yeah. So my mom put it in my dad's head, like, hey, one day we should do this. And my dad didn't forget and began researching and talking to any winemaker and vintner he could meet, and figured out he wanted limestone. He was inspired by Calera on top of Mount Harlan, a beautiful limestone outcropping for Pinot Noir, and Ridge Montebello, growing amazing, it's a Cabernet blend on top of a different mountain in Santa Cruz. And those were his two favorite California wineries that had limestone in common. He knew Grand Cru Burgundy, Left Bank Bordeaux, Champagne,
This had to just be a passion.
Well, yeah, and he pulled the trigger. I mean, look, he pulled the trigger.
He did. It was a very risky,
I think that's because your
ambitious.
Mom was back on.
Your mom. Yeah, that
You don't have like your other half going, honey, we can do it, we can do it.
And my mom was fed up. My dad had, tried to play around with other investments and just turned into nightmares and a ton of work. And my mom was just like, can we do something that we're passionate about and that we enjoy? And he's like, well, yeah, so he got even more serious. And in 1990, he bought the land, began planting. And the cool thing about his story is, most lawyers or doctors or bankers or inventors, they have one budget going into it. They plant and then they live with what they planted. And my dad never wanted to settle. So ripped out the Cabernet Franc, the Merlot, planted more Syrah, began experimenting with Grenache, Mourvedre, Roussanne. At one point, I think we had 18 varietals.
He's just playing.
Did he ever go to school, or was this all just like
Passion and
passion?
learning.
Nobody in our company went to higher education for viticulture or winemaking. And that's something we believe in, that, wine is artisanal. A professor from UC Davis would tell Ruben that he's killing our vineyard by not giving it water.
Yeah.
That's one reason we take so much pride that Ruben has been here since day one.
He's been with your family since the beginning?
Yeah.
By the way, speaking of Ruben, we're going to take a break, but we're going to come back, and I want to talk about the La Quadrilla. Ruben and his wife, and how that whole
and
part
we'll
of the
talk about the
branches.
wine that we're tasting now, which we just bought a case of.
Yes.
So, we'll be right back.
If you want to know more about Inside the Bunghole, join us on all our social media platforms. You can get a revisit and view all the latest posts, giveaways, and information on this podcast. Simply search Inside the Bunghole on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment. We would love to hear from you. Or you can email us at insidethebunghole@gmail.com. Thanks for tuning in, and visit our website at insidethebunghole.buzzsprout.com, where you can always find our latest podcast and past episodes. Cheers!
Welcome back to Inside the Bunghole. We are here enjoying some beautiful wine from Stolpman with Pete Stolpman, and we are in Los Olivos, and we're talking about Ruben. Ruben
Yes,
is
keeps
the
popping up.
winemaker that's been here since day one. And Petey, he does this La Quadrilla, which is a pet project of the wine makers, correct? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Definitely, and I love that little Freudian slip of calling me Petey.
Petey,
because
yeah.
that's what Ruben calls me. So, and you didn't know that. So I'm Petey.
You can call Pam Pampers.
Yes.
So Ruben is the youngest out of 11 kids. He followed brother number 5 and 7, Marcos and Enrique, over to Santa Barbara wine country. They were both working in vineyards, and in the first week in the late 80s of working in the vineyards with his brothers, he learned everything that they knew. He caught the attention of the godfather of viticulture here in the county, Jeff Newton. Jeff had come to Santa Barbara County from the Central Valley, from Cal State Fresno, where he was in viticulture, and Jeff just knew the potential of the area, the exposure to the Pacific, the soils, and Jeff was the first one to push the envelope into true fine wine farming rather than just trying to get by as a fledgling industry here in the county. And Jeff introduced Ruben to my dad and said, hey, Tom, this is your new vineyard manager. And Ruben, my dad was able to sponsor him, get him legal. And today, Ruben and his wife Maria are both full citizens. And the other thing that my dad told Ruben is, hey, like, I can't believe I'm crazy enough to do this, to jump off and buy this ranch. But if my dream is going to come true, I want it to positively affect everybody involved. And he was referring to, the fact that he didn't want to use migrant labor. He knew enough from his first career representing workers that the problem with migrant labor is that the entire family travels around for different crops. The kids never get an education. They don't have, opportunity, the American dream. So my dad told Ruben, let's figure out a way to employ you around, and I want to know everybody working the land. I want to know their families. I want to be able to sleep at night knowing that they are living locally with stability. Their kids are bilingual, yada, yada, yada. And that was a great privilege for Ruben, that Ruben could offer the best and brightest workers a full career, let alone a few days of work. So Ruben assembled a great family of 15 people and never looked back. The 90s, we were planting every year, a ton of training work, a ton of labor overall just to develop the vineyard. But as we fell into a rhythm after that initial planting wave, Ruben began giving the crew their own quadra, their own block. And he said, hey, now we're just going through the motions. You guys are following orders. I want you to become the farmer, not just the worker. You are now farming your block, you own it, and you need to create fine wine. And the crew immediately got more engaged. They began to ask questions of why Ruben wanted to do different methodologies throughout the vineyard, different exposures, different varietals. And within a couple of years, they were turning out really great fruit. Again, back then we were selling most of our fruit, and the crew was proficient enough that our grape customers never even realized that Ruben had this grand experiment going. Right. So when Ruben told my dad about it, my dad loved it, because the one thing that was still bugging my dad a bit, he was so proud and so excited of everything happening, but none of the crew drank wine. Whenever we'd have a barbecue, at that point I was a teenager drinking beer with the crew, and Ruben was becoming fanatically passionate about wine, but the workers weren't. And my dad said, okay, that's amazing that you gave the crew their own quadra. Let's give them all their wine. And if we don't put a back label on it, it'll be illegal to sell. That'll be their wine that they can take pride in and share with their family and friends. And that's what we did. Unfortunately, my dad never did the math on the napkin that evening when we were all at the barbecue, and my dad decided upon it. So the first year, we overloaded the crew with their own wine. They didn't have anywhere to put it. Everybody just threw big parties to drink all the wine. And
wow.
The party, that sounds fine to me.
The parties were legendary, to the point that our wine club members started hearing about it. Sommeliers started hearing about it, hey, what's up with this crew wine? Can we buy it? So by the next year, we started bottling it and selling it, and then giving the money back to the workers in the form of bonus, and then they still got a big chunk of wine, of course.
Great.
And
awesome.
Yeah, and then it's evolved beautifully. I took over the company in 2009. Of course, the financial crisis was looming.
Tough year, my friend, to take over.
And now, was that when you went from selling to when you went? Because initially you said you started off just selling off your grapes.
Right, but that didn't work because my dad mandated full-time employment, so we had high labor, and then the limestone as Ruben began to cut irrigation, our yields are getting lower and lower. So high cost for no yield.
Here you go, son.
Doesn't really work. Yeah. So we had a solution. I had graduated college in 2004. I had worked a real job for I think 2 years and barely. And before I told my dad, hey, you need someone to manage this, because my dad, after we built out our winery in 2001, he had bitten off more than he could chew. I mean, now he was trying to manage not only a vineyard but a full winery operation while still working a day job. Right. So my dad was thrilled, and we set up a training plan where I'd work a double vintage in 2006. So I went down and worked the Southern Hemisphere vintage in February, March, April, into May in Australia. And then I moved over the equator and worked the fall in Chianti, making Sangiovese. So I got Syrah and Sangiovese in 1 year. And then the most important thing I did was I worked for an importer and distributor, and actually sold a great portfolio of international wine to restaurants and retailers. So that was great training for the job that I'd signed up for, because in 2008 I took over the fruit contracts and I cut out all of the unprofitable ones with the idea that we would make more wine and then I would be there to sell it. And then of course in November of 2008, Wells Fargo sent us a little one sheet letter that said, hey, we're not renewing any of your operating credit lines, give us all that money back. We're like, will you take bulk wine and barrel? and can we still have some money for glass and cork and everything else we need? But that was a defining era for me, where it's 50-50 if we're going to survive. Ruben came to me with a personal pre-approval note from his bank, where he was going to borrow $100,000 and lend it to me in case I couldn't make payroll. So if there's ever any doubt about Ruben's,
Oh my God, I know.
And so we finally got refinanced in 2010. I was able to start hitting the road and selling wine now that my credit cards weren't maxed out anymore. And when I called Ruben to tell him, okay, we got refinanced, I was expecting like, oh my God, congratulations, that's amazing. All I said is, okay, you're out of excuses. You and Jess are going to come down and visit me and my family in Jalisco. I'd never been down to the little town where Ruben grew up. I got to meet his because we take a big chunk of like 3 or 4 weeks of the holidays off every year. That's sort of one big vacation for everybody. So everybody goes back home and sees the family. And we still only had 15 full-time people, and I hugged and shook hands with 1,500 people, and they all knew about me. They all knew about Jess, my dad. They took so much pride in their family member working on Quadrilla, or someone who had worked on Quadrilla, and then Ruben had promoted to another vineyard, and it all started with Stolpman, and I was just filled with pride and really moved. And I tell the story that we were drinking a ton of tequila. We had gone up to Fortaleza, the distillery in Tequila, brought home tequila by the pickup truck load back to Ruben's town. And that euphoric tequila cloud, I had a moment of clarity and like, let's make La Quadrilla way bigger than just the training block. We had 09 wine and barrel, went home, blended a lot more wine in, and kind of our rule going forward is the Quadrilla profit sharing wine is at least 10% of our production, and all the profit margin goes back to the crew divided by seniority in the form of a year-end bonus. So we have 28 full-time people now, which I'm super proud of, that I've been able to steward the growth of the crew. And I mean, 2020, like the only thing I did on whatever that date was, like Monday, March 17th or 18th.
Yes.
I hadn't slept the night. The shutdown order had come through on Sunday. I came home, got the kids to bed, opened QuickBooks, and just to look at my AR and how huge it was, knowing that I might not get any of that money that I was counting on, because we deal directly with restaurants in California.
Yep.
And knowing that my taste room was shut down, and the only thing I had concluded at some point in the wee hours was, okay, I'm calling Ruben, and at dawn, and having him let all the crew know that no matter what happens with the shutdown, with the pandemic, they are working full time. We're ag, so we're essential, so that wasn't a concern. But
and there was a lot of wine drinking going on.
Oh yeah. And it just, there's one thing that kind of cut the stress and gave me positivity. It's like, okay, at least I can put my foot down and say, okay, we're going to survive this somehow. But the first thing we're going to do is reassure the crew. And it was music to Ruben's ears, as Ruben had been getting calls all Sunday afternoon from other vineyards saying, we don't want to farm at all this year. And Ruben persuaded them to prune really aggressively, so there wouldn't be much growth to manage, and not much fruit either, and that way they could cut costs. And so here are all these people trying to tighten up, not have any labor costs, and then I'm calling Ruben saying, hey, tell the crew, all 28, no matter what, they're full-time, and it meant a lot to the crew, and we survived, and it was so great that at the end of harvest, our 2020 bonus grew again. So it's increased every year since 09. And it's really cool to actually, pivot and make the changes we made.
That's beautiful.
With La Quadrilla, tell me who has graced this label, because the labels are awesome.
Every year, do they change?
Every year they
Someone
change.
said your dad was on it with sombrero. So explain to me who designs the label and who gets picked on it.
So Carrie, our artist, our creative director, does an amazing job. It was her idea, because originally the training block would rotate around the vineyard every year to keep the crew learning a new varietal, a new exposure, a new training technique. The blend would change a lot. Now it's kind of locked in because we're blending so much into it that, it's kind of a vineyard-wide blend, but the labels are still fun. So yeah, my dad dressed up as a mariachi. Ruben had promised to get the next label tattooed after my assistant winemaker got the 2015 label tattooed. So in 16, we made Ruben's spirit animal, an Aztec hawk with a full moon in one wing, a waning moon in the other wing, picking shears in the feathers, and Ruben never got the tattoo. So Carrie got back at him because Carrie had lost sleep trying to she puts a lot of pressure on herself to make really eye-catching, beautiful labels representative of the crew. And here, not only was she making a label for 10% of our production, not a tiny bit of wine, but she was designing Ruben's first tattoo, and he never got it. So Carrie got back at him with the 2018 label, covered him. And Ruben modeled for it. He knew what was happening. Covered him in Photoshop tattoos, but they're all really uplifting. Siesta Puede, Yes You Can. Yeah. An ode to Maria, his wife. Blah blah blah. So Ruben certainly calls that the Cholo label. And then the 2019 label is the Aztec Piedra del Sol, the Sunstone, but modified into a lunar calendar because we farm by moon, by lunar phase. So yeah, it's a lot of fun to keep going. And then Ruben and Maria never took a cut of La Quadrilla. They are the American dream in one generation. The idea of Quadrilla is that we're trying to encourage the American dream happening at least by the second generation, where the second generation can go to college. Yeah. And it's so cool to see the kids of our original workers, and they're
it's not just an American dream, it's also that your family didn't really make a dime off someone's back. You didn't. And that happens, that's in the workforce all over. It's like, how cheap can I get my labor? How can I crank this thing
Especially in agriculture.
And here they're part of it. They are part of the whole process,
equation of success.
And your dad, a smart guy, man. He said, let's get them into wines, figure out what our product is. So if they're out there working on it, it's brilliant reverse engineering. And that's, kudos to your dad. And God, kudos to the whole Stolpman. Ruben and his wife. Speaking about his wife, we have a wine in front of me right now. Let's talk about this because we're going to do little tasting notes and...
Yeah, so I mentioned, Ruben and Maria. Like, Ruben is the American dream. He is, Jeff, I mentioned him before, Jeff Newton. He made Ruben a full partner really early. So Jeff and Ruben and their other partners, as the company has grown, they farm all of the best vineyards in Santa Barbara County. So Maria and Ruben are doing just fine. They live in our vineyard with their kids, and Marissa, their older daughter, is getting married in August, and it's great to be family with their family. And because Ruben and Maria never took a cut of La Quadrilla, I wanted to have a partnership with them. Ruben had already been making wine. He realized that the only way he could truly test a variable in the vineyard was to keep all the variables the same in the winery. So he would do a barrel from a vineyard block pruned by cane, another barrel from a vineyard block pruned by spur, and then he could taste the difference. And whatever was delicious, he would bottle his Hecho por Ruben, made by Ruben, and he'd kind of run out of experiments that he needed answers to, and just kept on making wine because he loved it. And by 2014, like, Ruben, you're making all these great wines, but in such tiny quantities from your other vineyards. Why don't we scale this up, make it a 50-50 partnership, bring the price point down to over-deliver, because Ruben is the greatest tool there, that he is the vineyard manager. He can work our fruit deal into his management contract, and not only does Ruben farm the vineyards, but he planted them. He knows them. He knows his favorite spots. So the idea of Par Maria, we had to honor Maria, because Ruben already in 2014 was famous. Mm-hmm. Photo in every wine magazine, consulting. He's on the group text like the best viticulturalists in the world. Like Michel Rolland calls him.
With no formalized training, he learned this all. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's just artisanal.
Crazy.
And
God love Ruben.
Yeah, so nobody knew about Maria. So when Ruben's off getting his photo taken, right, Maria is actually on the vineyard all day, in charge of our 28 full-time people. So we wanted to honor Maria with our partnership. So it's called Par Maria for Maria. And Maria grew up, I don't know, like 10 or 15 minutes away from Ruben, but in a larger town with really good electricity, for a couple generations. So their parties begin at dinner time, and if it's a good party, they go all night. Where Ruben, I think they got electricity when Ruben was like barely a teenager, so they're still stuck in the tradition of having a lunchtime celebration into the afternoon, and then Ruben and his brothers would jump into a pickup truck and head down to Santa
Go to
Cruz.
Maria's.
With electricity.
So the nickname for the villagers are the tequelotes, the night owls. So
The night owls.
that's why the big owl is on the front label.
I love the
Maria,
label.
yeah.
Love the label.
So the full name is Para Maria de las Tequelotes, for Maria of the Night Owls, and it's really cool that Maria has now gotten a lot of attention. She was on the cover of the Santa Barbara Independent. Univision did a segment on her and her female crew. It's actually kind of fun. So we have 8 women and 20 men on the crew, and the 8 women work completely separately from the men, which sounds weird, like Stolpman segregation. What's going on here?
The women probably do it better.
Oh no! Well, the women. You get it when you're out in the vineyard. You walk by the women, and it's really quiet. They're softly talking to one another. The music's soft. Most importantly, they have their own bathroom that they don't let the men touch. It's immaculate. And then, 300 yards away, so you approach the men working. They're already yelling hello. The music is blaring. They're making fun of each other. They're talking shit, and it's just a totally different
Animals.
vibe. And they can do the tough work and the forceful work.
Really is a nice
It's beautiful. And like I said, we just bought a case of it.
and affordable. Really affordable.
Really affordable.
So,
Great
you kept
price
the price
point.
really.
Yeah, $22 full retail.
Amazing.
And who pays full retail? Really?
Who pays? But that's a
Not a
dynamite.
wine club member.
Right.
So are you happy with this one?
Yeah, I love it. We're having the 19 vintage, which is really fresh. So the blend on the Par Maria Red is 80% Syrah, half of which is that whole grape fermentation, like we do with the, it's the carbonic fermentation.
Yep.
So 40% of the wine is that really like pure, elevated, feminine profile, and then 40% is the kind of core of crushed Syrah, a lot of color, a lot of depth, and then we add even more depth with 20% Petite Verdot. So the Petite Verdot is known as being black and inky. So it's really cool to have that breadth. To me, that's what a red blend should be. It should marry elements of lightness with body, with largesse. Right. I think red blends have gone a weird direction of late, where red blends are now about like making a bigger and bigger and bigger wine.
Right.
But to me, like, I have somebody that's told me like this wine is perfect for a 4-top where 2 people want Pinot, 2 people want Cab. I mean, this wine has
Right
a
in the
beautiful
middle.
fruit purity that a Pinot drinker wants, especially a New World Pinot drinker, and it has the depth that a Bordeaux drinker wants. So,
Is one person in Stolpman making all the labels? For all the
yeah, Carrie is our creative director for everything. So she actually did
estate and So Fresh, and she's doing
right.
all the labels.
And then
Okay.
Ruben does the writing, but she actually executes
Okay.
the label.
Okay.
And then, she for Par Maria, she actually made a wood carving of this owl, and it's actually a direct press
Okay.
of the wood carving.
Dynamite label.
So she actually made the wood carving?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. No, she's a keeper. She's been with us since like 2007.
Wow.
And she had just graduated from Brooks, the photography college.
Yeah.
And needed a day job while she honed her art. And she's been full time since probably like 2010. And I don't know when she had the title of creative director, but she has been that since 2008 probably.
Yeah. Well, every wine I've had from here has been unique and beautiful, and I don't think I've had a bad wine. It's just, and the story behind it is just amazing. I know. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and wrap it up.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk a little bit about where you're distributed, how to get in touch with you, how to be, all the good stuff. So we'll have a little sales pitch after this. Woohoo! We'll be right back.
If you want to know more about Inside the Bunghole, join us on all our social media platforms. You can get a revisit and view all the latest posts, giveaways, and information on this podcast. Simply search Inside the Bunghole on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment. We would love to hear from you. Or you can email us at insidethebunghole@gmail.com. Thanks for tuning in, and visit our website at insidethebunghole.buzzsprout.com, where you can always find our latest podcast and past episodes. Cheers!
Well, everybody, welcome back to Inside the Bunghole. We're sitting here with Pete Stolpman in Los Olivos of Stolpman Wines.
Can I add one thing?
Yes.
And his dogs.
And his big
And we
Earl
can't-
and B-Man.
Yes, and just explain these beautiful, beautiful dogs to us.
Yeah, so B-Man is an 11-and-a-half-year-old black, kind of Labrador-ish dog. He's been with me. I got him. He was born September 11th, 2009. So he's been with me my entire journey of running this beautiful business. And then our Great Dane, our 150-foot or 150-pound. Bro, if he stood up, he'd be about 10 feet tall,
Right.
as far as where his paws would be. But yeah, Early Bird, our Great Dane, he's only a little over 5, but you know, he's a mellow old man. He's a big dog.
It's a part of your tasting room is when you come in, and when you're here, I know when you're here.
Right, you can track
because
it down.
the dogs are
I know
here.
he's here.
I know,
see
the
his Great
dogs.
Dane.
Yes.
Yeah,
Because that dog doesn't leave your side.
No, he's my shadow, and my kids love him. Augie and Otto just crawl all over him, and I think we're hooked on Great Danes. So hopefully he'll live quite a few more years. But yeah, often there'll be a pack here. You know, we have Gus, we have Bricks, we have Lily, Morty. They're like, you know, there can be 7 dogs here.
It seems like dogs and tasting rooms kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, that's the company dogs alone.
Yeah.
Let alone people bringing their dogs. So,
Right.
you know, the 7 dogs get to 12 real quick. And, you know, with that big of a pack, they seem to get along.
Tell me a little bit about the tasting room and how...
And the wine club, too.
And the wine club.
And how does someone listening get a hold of your wine?
Yeah, so if you're coming to Los Olivos, we have our 2 tasting rooms, the classic patio for Maria and Quadria and all the classic reds and whites, and then right next door, what was originally the garage of our little cottage, we have the fresh garage for all the chilled, fun stuff. Make a reservation on our website, stolpmanvineyards.com. And then the best way to get our wines is what you figured out, to join the club. You get at least 25% off everything. If you've never tried our wines, the best way to dabble is to join the Quadria Club. And that focuses on the reds like Quadria and Maria. And then if you do the mixed, you get, you know, Rosé and Sauvignon Blanc and Viognier. And that's 6 bottles for $100, only twice a year. And then you get all of our emailed offers, you get invited to our events and everything like that. But yeah, we have great partnerships throughout the country, and we're lucky enough to have distribution throughout the world now, throughout Europe, Japan, Thailand, Russia.
Are those for mainly restaurants?
Yeah,
or?
independent wine shops and restaurants. We're
Yeah.
not in many big chains. We have Lovey Bunches in Whole Foods, and in Southern California, a couple other ones in Whole Foods. But we mainly focus as an independent boutique winery.
Yes.
We find more often than not our best marriages, our best partnerships are with fellow, unique kind of little guys. So
So now, are you okay looking back, your dad steering you down the winemaking? Or
I
is that-
can't imagine doing anything
else?
Yeah, I mean, it's just so fulfilling, and especially now that, you know, we grew a lot in the first decade of me doing this, and now that we have our brand established and people love our wines, and we've kept the prices really relevant and compelling for the quality that we're delivering, the pandemic has been a silver lining where I've gotten to stay home with the family and not go out on the road promoting. So yeah, it's you know, I've been blessed to be home this past year.
Yes. Yeah, and that is true with a lot of people, is that, you know, yes, it's been horrible, but yes, there's certainly been a beautiful side to it.
We learned canasta.
Wow.
We have a couple we play with every week, and we thought, why are we playing pandemic?
Pandemic.
That's what it was.
What does canasta have to do with bungholes?
Exactly.
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 Well, thank you so much for sitting down with us and talking to us about your amazing winery and your amazing wines.
Great story.
And your amazing winemakers and all that. It's
family.
a great story, and it's a great wine. So, StolpmanWines.com?
StolpmanVineyards.com.
Vineyard. Throw the vineyard in there.
.com. Amazing wines. Check them out. And thanks for joining us on Inside the Bunghole, and we'll talk to you. You'll hear from us soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.
If you want to know more about Inside the Bunghole, join us on all our social media platforms. You can get a revisit and view all the latest posts, giveaways, and information on this podcast. Simply search Inside the Bunghole on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment. We would love to hear from you. Or you can email us at insidethebunghole@gmail.com. Thanks for tuning in, and visit our website at insidethebunghole.buzzsprout.com, where you can always find our latest podcast and past episodes. Cheers!